Hi, everyone. Today I will talk to you about siblings. Often, when we talk about the siblings' relationship in the context of aggression towards family members, or even if we talk about the context of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder or complex trauma, we know that from research in adoptive families, foster families, there's many kids with multiple diagnoses, and it's more complex than what we often see in research, whereas you have a child with a neurodevelopmental disability like autism, and then the siblings are neurotypical. So what we're seeing in adoptive and foster families are a very complex dynamics. We're also talking about children at times who are coming from adoption, foster care, and then there's maybe other children who came to the family by birth. So this brings other challenges. But from research, what we know is siblings need basically have very similar needs. One of them is to be validated. And oftentimes I talk about, as caregivers, when we experience aggression from the child, AFCCA, or if we have a child with FASD, oftentimes parents say that they feel misunderstood or they feel like they're not being believed by professionals or by people around them. And it's a very similar experience that siblings will describe, that oftentimes when they try to share what they're going through with friends, with professionals, they're not necessarily being believed, or they at times will demonize their sibling, or they won't understand that they still love their sibling, even though there's things that are really difficult in the dynamic. So really what they're asking for is for us to validate their feelings as professionals and also as parents to say, I believe you, this is really hard. And sit with those feelings for as long as possible, even though you feel like they're exaggerating or you really want to soothe their pain. Sometimes it's better to sit with the pain a bit longer so they will feel like you're not trying to minimize what they're experiencing in the relationship with their siblings. Also, there's the idea that we want to acknowledge what they're feeling, not minimize it in any way. They may have very conflictual feelings, and feelings come and go. And many kids will just express what they're feeling in the moment. Doesn't mean it's something that they think all the time. So, for example, you may have a child who says, "Oh, I'm so mad you adopted my sibling," for example. And that's very hurtful to hear. But I often say to parents, maybe in that moment, this is how your child felt. Doesn't mean this is how they always feel about their siblings, right? Obviously, if you feel like this is going, in the wrong direction for a really long time, you may want to find professional support for your child. But just remember that feelings come and go, and children are very much in the present moment, and maybe this is what they felt at that moment. Also, we want to make sure that there's support for your child. And sometimes that means, really being creative about where we can find the support. So, and especially if there's like aggression within the home by one of the siblings or, things that are really, really hard, you want to have other people around your child. What we encourage is that we don't keep it a secret. We don't expose it publicly, but we talk about, okay, how can, some of our relatives, some of our neighbors, school staff can support us in what we're experiencing. And it's the same for siblings. We know that social support is a really strong buffer against trauma. So, for example, if there's an incident in the house and your son or your daughter knows that they can call someone, or that the aunt will text them, or the next day maybe the EA will meet with them and go over what happened, just that debrief can go a long way in them feeling supported and preventing some of the secondary trauma that they may experience. So this is a slide that we're using sometimes to help people think of who else can be in your child's life. And this goes for the sibling, but also for the child who's actually displaying the aggression. And here, so this is from this research we have here at the bottom. And this is a research on siblings who have a brother or a sister with FASD. And they do want to tell people, yes, we do love our siblings and our experience is really difficult, but it doesn't mean that we love them less, right? And yes, they're seeing the challenge. So it's kind of both, right? Similar to us as parents, as caregivers, when we have a child with maybe extreme, behaviors, we still love them, but the relationship may be difficult for some time. And again, I'm making sort of generalization. Every situation is unique, but oftentimes this is what we're hearing from siblings, and this is what we see in the research. We also want to make sure that they have people to talk to who believe them. So here, this is a quote from the research I just shared, and she says, I had a friend, basically she lived nearby, so she knew the hard things that was happening in the home, and she said, she knows I'm not making this stuff up. And as caregivers, you probably understand the experience of like when you're sharing what's happening in the home and the person just believes you and say, yeah, I see how hard this is and I believe you. They don't minimize or try to like rescue you right away. They really want to listen, hear you, and support you. And she says she's probably the only person that actually believes me and understand when I'm tell her which it is. It's kind of nice to have at least one person. So, doesn't mean you have tons of people who understand, but at least one or two people that they can go to share. We also want to destigmatize by being really open about the challenges of adoptive families, of families who have children with FASD or other brain-based disabilities, complex trauma, attachment difficulties, and if possible, meeting other parents. So the other families, who are going through similar challenges can be really good for them so they don't feel like it's super abnormal or, they're the only family dealing with it. We want to give them information too about attachment, trauma, FASD, all the things that maybe the sibling is experiencing, so they would understand that the behaviors is stemming from a brain-based disability. I know that a lot of siblings would say, well, but like they're being too lenient, they don't punish my sibling, and like they feel like things are not necessarily being addressed. So that's why I think giving them as much information as possible, using professionals to share the information so they understand, okay, my parents are just, they're not like being lenient or whatever. They're really following professionals' advice in terms of what should be done for my sibling. I also want to add that isolation will grow the feeling of helplessness. A lot of siblings will experience shame if they don't feel supported. I know a lot of caregivers are hesitant to share about what's actually happening in the home, the severity of maybe aggressive behaviors. However, violence and aggression thrives in secrecy. And I'm not saying we have to tell the whole world about what's going on, but telling certain people to make sure we're supported, we're breaking the isolation, and very often we'll see a reduction in aggression. We also want to make sure that our children don't feel like they're living with a big secret or that this is really taboo. And this comes to like destigmatizing the issue. We all need support. We need help. We need to be vulnerable enough to be able to talk about our problems. And the supporters, the people we will talk to, can even provide respite, not only to the child who's maybe more displaying the aggression or has FASD, but also having relationship with the siblings. The supporters can help building connection between them and communities, teaching them life skills. Very often there's one voice in the family, which is the child who's maybe more problematic, that will take a lot of space. So we want the siblings to have a voice that's the same level of noise in a way, right? Like we want their needs to be supported. And that's really hard if you don't have supporters to help them or to help you with them. So one thing that we often say is like it's really important to the support for the supporters, for the professional, and for the caregivers to ask regularly the sibling, "How can I help? How are you feeling?" And maybe some of your children will not feel comfortable uh, telling you how bad they're feeling to protect you, feeling like maybe you've got enough on your plate. So maybe you want to validate their feelings or say out loud what maybe they are experiencing. I know that some families will also make sure that the child has someone to talk to, like a professional, even when things are not too bad. So when things escalate, they already have a relationship with a therapist. You also want to believe their perspective, maybe if it's off, maybe if it's maybe not exactly what happened, that's not your perspective. Believe their perspective and try to explore with them the impact of this perspective on their well-being. You can also offer practical support by being a supporter, by being a caregiver or a professional. Sometimes it's just, driving them somewhere, bringing them to their sports, bringing meals. All these things can go a long way in helping the whole family. So really the idea when we have a situation of aggression towards family members or family who is really struggling because of neurodevelopmental disabilities or trauma in the home, we want to think of all family members and thinking in terms of improving their quality of life. We have here on this slide a tornado. So a lot of families describe what they're experiencing as a big tornado hitting their family when there's like a really, really big crisis. And it does leave devastation behind. It leaves people with physical injury, emotional injuries, when things are very extreme. So we want to be there to support all family members, not only the child who's, maybe the focus of the interventions. So thank you for listening. Please send your questions. We have many resources for siblings. I added here the thesis of the quote I told you about. There's another PDF on helping your kids understand their siblings with FASD. And there's a video on a caregiver's perspective of the challenges in, having multiple siblings. Also, the consortium website on AFCA has many tip sheets. They have a video on what siblings of children who display AFCA are experiencing. And we also have a video on relational gestures. Relational gestures are anything you can do with your children to improve your relationship, regardless of your role in their life. Thank you.